Hi, my name is Rachel Hart, and I'm 31 years old. The night I lost my home started with a key that no longer worked. I twisted it twice before the door opened from the inside. My sister stood there, boxes stacked behind her like trophies. Have you ever had your own home taken over by family? Share in the comments. This is her place now, my mother said from the couch. Find somewhere else, she needs space. I froze in the doorway, rent receipt still in my purse. The apartment I paid for had just become their stage. The place smelled like cardboard and lemon cleaner. My sister leaned on the door like a bouncer. You can take small stuff tonight, she said. Big items stay. I need the dresser and the desk. The desk is mine, I said steady. Not anymore, she smiled. I'm settled. My mother folded a throw blanket. Don't start, she said. We finally have harmony. Harmony meant my name off the mailbox. My spare key no longer fit the lock. In the bedroom I painted last spring. Her suitcase lay open on my quilt like a claim. You were never meant to have this place, she said. Be grateful she's letting you pack slowly, my mother added. I wrapped photos in shirts and filled grocery bags. Her boxes were new, mine were borrowed. The utility app showed my autopay ran this morning. Electric, water, internet drafted from my account. Cancel them, my mother said. You won't need them. Where am I going? I asked. Silence answered. I texted Mara and asked about her couch. She sent her address. That was enough. I packed until the clock blinked past midnight. My sister posted pillows, caption fresh start. By the door, my toolbox waited like a dog. I need that, I said, reaching. She nudged it back with her shoe. Landlord said no drilling. I could have argued rights and lease. I saved my breath for the stairs. Mara opened and pulled me in. Sit, she said. You look breakable. On her couch, I spread receipts on the table. Rent checks, statements, utility emails, months of proof. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Don't be dramatic, you've outgrown that place. I didn't answer. I photographed every page I'd signed, then slept like someone guarding a door in her mind. Morning, I returned for the last box. My sister wore my sweatshirt and called me a squatter. Squatters don't pay, I said, showing the app. Details, she said. You hide behind details. I didn't hide, I documented. I kept my voice even. On the porch, my mother handed me a sack. Mail for you, she said, turning away. Inside were flyers and a bank notice with my name. I slid it into my folder and zipped it shut. If they wanted harmony, I wanted dates and numbers. I'm not a storm, I told myself, I'm a ledger. Ledgers don't argue, they balance. Every rent check I paid was proof, and I kept them all. Mara's couch was a bridge, not a destination. I stacked my proof in a shoebox and breathed slow. Day shifts at the print shop, nights at the cafe. Tips in an envelope, paychecks to a separate account. I rented a P.O. box near the bus stop. No more surprises at an address they controlled. At lunch, I printed statements and stapled the months. Rent, utilities, deposit, maintenance requests. Everything dated clean. Mara slid tea across the table. You're building a case, she said. Keep going. My emails stayed polite and precise. Subject lines carried months and unit numbers. Downstairs, Mrs. Kelly waved me over. Keys on a ring. Paint under her nails. You pay on time every month? She asked. Yes, I said. I still am. She nodded. Ask management for the tenant ledger, she said. And send letters certified. Paper makes people behave. That night I drafted a simple cold request. Please confirm rent received and account standing to date. The clerk stamped the green card at mailing. Delivery proof, she said. Keep it with the copy. I bought a cheap folder with metal prongs. Tabs. Lease, payments, utilities, communication, photos. I added photos from before they moved in. Fresh paint, clean stove, meter readings with today's paper. Mara borrowed a handheld scanner from her office. We fed pages through until the hum felt soothing. I muted the family thread and let it fill. Screenshots went to the folder, not my bloodstream. My sister posted a houseplant in her window. I saved it, timestamp and location untouched. Utilities called about an updated contact. I listened. No authorization granted, I said, noting the agent's name. Saturdays, I cleaned for Mrs. Kelly for cash. Numbers beat noise, she said. Use them. The tenant ledger arrived on thick paper. Every check matched, balance owed, 0. I added bus receipts and 2 weeks of timesheets. Judges like timelines, so does the truth. At work, I hemmed my voice to fit. Short sentences. Clear requests, no spin. I stopped visiting the old building at night. Safety was a plan, not a dare. I changed passwords and set up alerts. If anything moved, I wanted pings, not shocks. Head down, records up, the paper grew louder. Mara tapped the bulging folder and smiled. Good heavy, she said. I slid the ledger in. Not finished, I said. Ready when finished finds me. I wasn't plotting fireworks or speeches. I was collecting bricks and checking where they fit. When my mother texted, "Be reasonable," I archived it. Reason lives in dates, not wishes. I slept better beside labeled tabs and rubber bands. I woke measured, steady, hard to move. I was quiet, but my folder was getting thicker. On Tuesday, the property office number flashed on my phone. I answered on speaker with Mara beside me. "Ms. Hart? Victor from Crescent Properties. We need to verify a transfer request on your unit." "I didn't request a transfer," I said. "Which document?" "A tenant transfer addendum," he said. "Signed by you last month, moving occupancy to your sister." "Email the PDF," I replied. It arrived before we hung up. My name sat there in slanted, 2 neat strokes. A signature that looked like mine if I were pretending. The date matched the week my key stopped working. 2 more forms. Contact and autopay updates. Also bearing my forged name. "You didn't sign that," Mara said, reading over my shoulder. "Not even close." I pulled my lease and compared. My real signature looped, this one stabbed. I called Victor back with both files open. "That signature is not mine. We suspected something was off," he answered. "The handwriting doesn't match your application. We also received permission from your mother," he added. "An email saying I'd moved out and gifted the unit." "Preserve that email with headers," I said. "I dispute every transfer or authorization." "Come tomorrow at 10, he replied. "We'll review originals and pull your ledger." In the conference room, Victor spread the file. "Lease, renewal, my clean ledger." The fake addendum. "Is this your signature?" he asked. "No," I said. "Compare page 3 of the lease." He nodded at the mismatch. "Forgery voids any transfer." He slid over the printed email. "From Evelyn Hart. Rachel isn't responsible anymore. We agreed as a family. Please move the unit to her sister for continuity." "Family didn't agree," I said, circling the sentence. "Family forged. We'll freeze changes pending legal," Victor said. "No keys, mail updates, or utility swaps." "Thank you," I said. "I'll send a sworn statement today." At home, I scanned the PDFs, saved a second copy, and labeled the folder. Forgery, Unit 3B, Timeline. My mother texted, "Be reasonable. Don't ruin this." I screenshotted it and filed it under communication. That night, I practiced my statement out loud. Then I wrote the line that mattered. I did not sign the tenant transfer addendum. I did not authorize any change of contact or autopay. The bank notary stamped the page the next morning. The apartment wasn't just stolen, it was forged out of me. Friday 10 a.m., conference room B. Victor, attorney on speaker. My mother, my sister, and me. I set my folder down and stayed standing. "Short meeting," I said. "Dates first, then fixes." Victor tapped the file. We compared signatures and records. The transfer is void. The addendum is forged. My mother drew a breath like curtains before a show. "You're tearing this family apart over a lease." "I didn't tear it," I said. "You signed my name." I slid the ledger forward. Rent paid, balance 0. My sister sank into her hoodie. "You were hardly here." "Payments don't vanish because I worked," I answered. "Management restores original occupancy immediately," the attorney said. Victor read corrections like a receipt. "Keys by 4. Mailbox name reinstated today. Utilities revert to the original account holder," the attorney added. "Unauthorized contact changes rescinded in writing. We agreed as a family." My mother tried again. "Family agreements don't overwrite signatures," Victor said. "I'll need this in a letter," I said. "Possession date, key log, notice to the unauthorized occupant." "Unauthorized? I had permission," my sister scoffed. "From the person you impersonated," I said. "Not permission." Victor slid a draft across the table. "Read and initial. We'll file today." "Recce at 5, I added. "I'll be there." "Approved," he said. "Escort for personal items only." "Rachel, keep this private," my mother pleaded. "Private is how this happened," I said. "Paper is how this ends." "You may file a police report," the attorney noted. "I will if needed," I said. "Forgery isn't a family spat." "Drama queen," my sister muttered. Victor stacked the forged forms into a labeled folder. "Quarantined for legal," he said. "Do not touch." "Anything else?" he asked. "Yes, a utility statement I can forward. Original account holder, Rachel Hart. No authorized changes by others." "Be reasonable," my mother whispered. "I am," I said. "Reason lives in dates, not wishes." "Keys at 4, rekey at 5, escort at 5:30, Victor said. In the hallway, my sister grabbed my sleeve. "You could have just shared." "I did," I said. "Every month, it's called rent." She let go. I signed the visitor log and lifted my folder. For the first time, they couldn't call me dramatic. They had to call me right. At 4, my sister handed over the keys, eyes down. At 5, the locksmith spun the cylinders clean. New cores, new cards, fresh log, Victor said. Only you and management have access. I nodded. An escort watched while she took her things. Only personal items? He reminded. She didn't argue. By 6, the mailbox showed my name again. The label clicked into place like a small verdict. Email arrived at 6:42 p.m., restoration letter signed. Utilities confirmed me as the sole account holder by morning. My mother texted, "We can still handle this privately." Private made room for forgery, I replied. We're done. I wiped every counter, then opened the windows wide. Cardboard and lemon cleaner left with the evening air. Mara brought takeout and paper cups. To locks that turn the way they should, she said. I set the folder on the kitchen table. A new tab read, Restoration, Unit 3B, Final. I kept the old tabs too, because memory fades. Paper doesn't. And neither do boundaries. Mrs. Kelly knocked with a spare door chain. Add this, she said. Numbers beat noise, but hardware helps. I rehung my prints in quiet, patient lines. Not to claim, to recognize what was already mine. I changed every password and shredded old copies. Autopay reset. Alerts on. Forwarding removed. Notes dated. On Saturday, I bought a small plant for the sill. Not symbolism, oxygen. But it looked like a beginning. Therapy started Tuesdays at 7:30. We said the words, fraud, coercion, displacement, return. I keep hearing be reasonable, I told her. Reason is what got you here, she answered. Dates and facts. Work hours normalized. The envelope grew an emergency label. Quiet came back, heavier, and finally on my side. A letter from management confirmed completion of the file. No balance owed. No disputes pending. I framed it inside. When my mother sent a holiday photo, I didn't reply. Silence isn't revenge. It's a locked door I pay for. My sister texted, "You could have shared." We're done sharing keys, I wrote. I stood in the doorway that used to reject me. The key turned smooth, like a sentence without doubt. This apartment isn't just walls or paperwork. It's proof I belong where I've already paid to stand. I watered the plant and watched the window fog. For the first time, the room felt exactly my size. If you've ever been forced out of what you built, you are not alone. Before saying goodbye, if this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Don't forget to subscribe for more true family betrayal stories. That reminds us we are stronger than we think.
The late afternoon sun slipped through the blinds, cutting stripes of gold across my living room. I had just eased myself onto the couch, propping up my sore knee with a pillow. When the phone rang, the screen flashed with Marjorie's name. My younger sister never called just to talk. "Selena," she said without greeting, her voice brisk and rehearsed. "I need you to watch the baby this weekend. Nate and I have that work retreat in Asheville. We'll be back Sunday night." For a moment, I didn't answer. I could almost hear the expectation in her tone, like the request had already been settled before I picked up. I cleared my throat. "Marjorie, I can't. I have a doctor's appointment Saturday morning. It's a follow-up for my knee." Silence filled the line. I thought maybe she hadn't heard me. Then came her reply, sharp and cold. "Cancel it. The baby comes first." Her words landed like a stone in my chest. Cancel a medical appointment as if my recovery was a hobby I could rearrange at her convenience. I tried to steady my breath. It's not something I can move around. And, honestly, I'm still getting tired easily. I don't think I can manage 2 full days alone with him. There was a pause, then the unmistakable sound of her exhale, heavy with judgment. "Wow. I guess you're just not very supportive of our family." My fingers tightened around the phone. Dozens of responses rushed to the back of my throat, reminders of the bills I'd covered, the nights I'd stayed up rocking her child so she could sleep, the sacrifices I'd made without complaint. But the words stayed locked inside. She ended the call abruptly, leaving only the low hum of silence in my ear. I set the phone down with a trembling hand. For years, I'd been the one she leaned on. Now I sat in my quiet living room, the weight of her words pressing heavier than the ache in my knee, realizing something had shifted that could not be undone. I stared at the phone, knowing this was only the beginning of what she would demand next. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the muted glow of the phone screen. Her words echoed in my head, each syllable sharpening into something colder than I wanted to admit. Not supportive, as if years of bending myself into knots had been erased by one no. I leaned back and let my eyes close. Images unspooled like film reels I hadn't asked to watch. The time Marjorie called me at midnight, frantic because Nate had the flu and she couldn't handle the baby alone. I had driven across town in the rain, stayed up until dawn with a feverish toddler, and still went to work without sleep the next day. Or the year she asked me to cover her portion of our parents' property taxes just until things smoothed out. I never saw that money again. But she bought a new stroller the very next month. There were birthdays I missed with friends because she needed a sitter. Vacations I canceled because she said it was all hands on deck when her second child was born. Each time, I told myself it was what sisters did. That family meant sacrifice. But now, sitting in the quiet of my own living room, I could finally see the pattern. Marjorie's needs had always been urgent, non-negotiable. Mine had been background noise, something she expected me to mute whenever it conflicted with her plans. She didn't ask, she demanded, and I had obliged, year after year. I taught her that my yes was automatic, that my life bent to hers. My knee throbbed beneath the pillow, a steady reminder of what it cost me to keep saying yes. For the first time. The imbalance wasn't just uncomfortable, it was undeniable. I thought I was helping out of love, but maybe, all along, I'd only been training her to take. The realization sank deeper, leaving me unsettled, as if the foundation beneath us had always been cracked and I had only just now noticed. And then, before the weight of it could settle completely, her first message arrived. The first text came barely an hour after our call. Fine. If you can't be there for us, don't expect us to keep bending for you. I read it twice, my chest tightening with every word. By evening, more messages arrived. You're selfish. Always have been. I guess I just didn't want to see it. Then another family pulls together. You wouldn't understand. The words were clipped, almost rehearsed, as if she'd been saving them for the first chance to throw at me. The next morning, Aunt Carol left me a voicemail. Her voice was heavy with pity. Selena, I don't know what happened, but Marjorie told us you refused to help with the baby. Everyone's talking. She said you don't want to be part of the family anymore. I didn't expect this from you. I sat at my kitchen table, gripping the edge until my fingers ached. After all the years of covering for Marjorie's mistakes, I was now the selfish one. I wanted to scream, to catalog every sacrifice like evidence in a trial, but I stayed silent. Silence had always been safer. 2 days later, the real blow came. I stopped by the old house, our parents' house, the one Marjorie still lived in. It was a place I had painted, repaired, and paid taxes on. A place that still smelled faintly of our childhood summers. When I tried the key, it stuck. I jiggled it, pressed harder, but it wouldn't turn. She had changed the locks. For a long moment, I just stood there on the porch, staring at the door I'd once walked through freely, the door that had been ours. The blinds twitched upstairs, a shadow shifting quickly away. My throat burned, not from anger, but from the sharp taste of erasure. I stepped back slowly, clutching the useless key, realizing this wasn't just a fight over babysitting. This was Marjorie drawing a line meant to push me out of my own family. And as I drove away, the first tremor of grief gave way to something sharper, something closer to resolve. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, the useless key still heavy in my purse, and thought about every time I had answered her calls without hesitation. The memories piled up faster than I could push them away, until the silence in the house felt unbearable. I rose from bed and went to the hallway closet, the one I hadn't opened in years. On the top shelf sat the old accordion file, its edges frayed from being shuffled too many times. I pulled it down and carried it to the kitchen table. The label in my handwriting read simply, Family. Inside were neat stacks of paper I had saved out of habit. Not intention. The first page I pulled free was a copy of a check from nearly 10 years ago, $4,000 to cover Nate's hospital bills when his insurance fell short. Beneath that, the receipt for the mortgage payment I had covered when Marjorie and Nate were on the verge of foreclosure. Tucked deeper were notes I'd scribbled on sticky pads, dates I babysat overnight, reminders to pick up their daughter from preschool when work ran late, meal lists I prepared when they both came down with the flu. I kept turning pages, a copy of the wire transfer for the down payment on their house, credit card bills I'd paid when they were between jobs, grocery receipts where the totals always seemed to climb higher when I was the one swiping my card. Line after line, page after page, the record of my sacrifices unfolded in front of me like a ledger written in invisible ink until tonight. My chest tightened as I traced the faded signatures. It wasn't just the money, it was the hours, the missed chances, the way I'd reshaped my life to fit around theirs. For years, I had told myself this was what family did. But as I stared at the piles, the question rose like a whisper I couldn't silence. Who has ever taken care of me? The grief came first, raw and sharp, but beneath it a steadier current moved. It wasn't rage exactly, more like the first steady breath after holding it too long. I stacked the papers back into the file, pressed the edges closed, and knew the time for silence was over. In the morning, I called Mr. Whitfield's office and asked for an appointment. Mr. Whitfield's office smelled faintly of leather and old paper, the kind of place where decisions carried weight. He had been my parents' attorney before me, a man who never rushed his words and never treated me like I was naive. When he welcomed me into the small conference room, I felt the steadiness of his presence before we'd even sat down. I need to make some changes, I said, sliding the worn folder onto the table. My voice was even, but my hands trembled slightly against the polished wood. Financial. Legal. I can't keep things the way they are. He nodded, as if he had been expecting this moment for years. Tell me where you'd like to begin. I started with the practical. The shared accounts Marjorie had partial access to needed to be closed. The recurring transfers to her household, canceled immediately. Mr. Whitfield listened without interruption, jotting neat notes in his narrow script, only pausing to ask for dates or account numbers. Each time he wrote something down. The air in my lungs felt clearer, as though I was reclaiming pieces of myself line by line. Then came the harder part. My will, I said quietly. The words felt heavy, but not frightening. I want to redirect my assets. Everything I'd planned to leave to Marjorie and her children, I'd like to designate instead to Clara Benton. His brows lifted slightly, but there was no judgment in his eyes. Your friend? Yes, I said. She's been there without asking anything in return. That matters more to me than blood at this point. For the first time in weeks, a calm settled in my chest. It wasn't revenge I was carving into these documents. It was dignity. By the time I signed the preliminary forms, my hand ached, but my heart felt steady. Mr. Whitfield gathered the papers, stacking them neatly. We'll finalize everything next week. You've taken the first step. I left his office with the sunlight sharp on my face, carrying no apologies and no guilt, only the certainty that something in me had shifted for good. By the time I returned home, Marjorie's name was already lighting up my phone. The first call came just after dinner. My phone rattled against the counter. Marjorie's name flashing. I let it go to voicemail. But she called again, and again, until I finally answered. What the hell is this? She shouted before I could speak. The transfer didn't come through, and the credit card declined. Do you think this is funny? Her voice cracked with fury, sharp enough to make me hold the phone away from my ear. I steadied myself. It's not a mistake. I stopped the payments. There was silence for a beat, then an explosion. You can't just do that. You know what we rely on. You've always helped us. You don't get to pull the rug out now. I do. I said softly, though my heart was pounding. I've done enough. More than enough. She scoffed, the sound bitter. So this is who you really are. Petty. Ungrateful. After everything I've let you be part of our family. Our kids, you cut us off over some ridiculous appointment. You're unbelievable. The words stung, but something inside me held firm. I'm your sister, Marjorie, not your servant. You'll figure out your bills. You always do. She hung up with a sharp click. A moment later, the messages started long paragraphs of accusation, fragments of rage, a parade of blame. By morning, my aunt called again, pleading that I be the bigger person. Another cousin left a message, saying Marjorie was in tears, that I'd gone too far. I sat at my kitchen table, phone buzzing endlessly beside my teacup. For years, those voices would have been enough to drive me back, to make me apologize for boundaries I never should have had to defend. But now, I felt only a thin, steady calm. They didn't know the half of what I'd given, and maybe they didn't care to. I turned the phone face down and whispered the truth aloud. If only for myself, I am her sister, not her servant. The words settled into me like a promise, stronger than any apology I could have offered. By the time evening came, the storm of calls hadn't slowed, but I noticed something surprising I no longer felt the need to pick up, and that was when her next message arrived, laced not with rage, but with something else entirely. The message blinked on my screen just before midnight. Unlike the others, it wasn't blistering with rage. I'm sorry. It read, I lost my temper. I shouldn't have said those things. Can we start over? I stared at the words, half expecting them to dissolve. After days of venom, they looked out of place, almost gentle. A second message followed. We really need you. Selena, just this once. Please help us out, and I promise things will be different. For a moment. My chest ached. This was the voice I'd been waiting for all my life, contrition, even if brief. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, temptation pulling at me. What if I was wrong? What if this was the moment she finally realized how far she'd gone the next morning? I almost convinced myself to call her back, but when I walked out to the mailbox, the truth landed harder than any apology could. Among the usual envelopes was one from the county clerk's office, addressed to both of us as heirs. My stomach tightened as I slid it open. Inside were copies of documents Marjorie had filed quietly, without a word to me petitioning for sole control of our parents' estate. She'd argued I was no longer involved with the family and therefore unfit to co-manage the property. The words blurred as I read them, my hands trembling. The apology, the plea for help. It hadn't been about healing. It had been about securing what she wanted without interference. I folded the papers carefully and set them on the table. The silence around me sharp and absolute. For years I had doubted myself, second-guessed every instinct, convinced her needs outweighed my own. But here was proof in black ink that her tears were tools, her words weapons. I slid the documents back into their envelope and felt something inside me lock into place. Whatever she thought she could take from me, it would no longer include my trust. That evening, I picked up the phone not to call her, but to dial Clara instead. Clara showed up on my doorstep the next afternoon with a grocery bag hanging from one arm. I brought soup, she said simply, brushing past me like she'd been doing it all her life. The familiar scent of garlic and thyme followed her into the kitchen. I hadn't planned on telling her everything, but the words tumbled out as I set bowls on the table. I told her about the calls, the texts, the locks changed, the apology that wasn't, and finally the papers from the clerk's office. She listened without flinching, her sharp green eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, arms folded. Selena, I've known you since college. You've spent half your life holding other people up. But when do you let someone hold you? The question lodged in my throat. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came. Clara reached across the table, her hand firm and warm on mine. You deserve respect, not guilt, not manipulation. Respect. Her certainty steadied me more than I wanted to admit. For years, I'd been drowning in the noise of Marjorie's demands. And now, here was Clara, offering silence, space, and something that felt dangerously like peace. You know, she added lightly, if you ever need to get out for a while, my guest room's always open. Fresh sheets, window that looks out on the garden, no one banging on your door demanding you cancel your life. The offer hit me harder than any accusation Marjorie had hurled. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear it that I had somewhere else to land. Someone else who saw me not for what I gave, but for who I was. I gripped her hand, the edges of my resolve softening into gratitude. Family, I realized, wasn't always about blood. Sometimes it was about the people who showed up, soup in hand, without asking for anything in return. When Clara left that evening, the house didn't feel empty. It felt steadier, as if her presence had left behind a promise I could finally believe in, and it was that steadiness I carried into the night, until the knock came at my door. The knock turned into pounding before I reached the door. When I opened it, Marjorie stood on the porch, her face flushed, hair disheveled, a storm ready to break. She pushed past me without asking, the baby balanced on her hip, fussing from the commotion. "You're destroying this family," she spat, her voice sharp enough to rattle the air. "He misses you. He cries at night. Do you even care you're abandoning us?" I steadied myself, watching her pace the room as if anger alone could force me back into place. "I care," I said quietly. "But caring doesn't mean being used." Her head snapped toward me. "Used. After everything we've given you, our trust, our children." I cut her off before she could twist the story any further. "I'm not free childcare. Marjorie, I'm your sister." The words hung between us like a line drawn across the floor. For once, I didn't rush to soften them. I let the silence do its work. She blinked, caught off guard, then pressed harder. "You think you're better than me? Fine. Keep your money, keep your pity, but don't come crawling back when you realize you need us." I didn't flinch. The baby whimpered, and she adjusted him awkwardly, her bravado faltering in the smallest crack. I saw then what I'd missed for years, not strength, but desperation. Her entire world balanced on the assumption I would always bend. "I won't argue with you anymore," I said, voice steady. "You've made your choices, and I've made mine." She glared at me, but for the first time. Her words seemed to stumble before reaching my ears. She shifted the baby on her hip and marched toward the door, slamming it behind her. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt mine, and in that stillness, I knew exactly what had to come next. The days after Marjorie's visit stretched quiet and clean, like the air after a storm. I woke early, brewed tea, and sat by the window without waiting for a phone to ring or a demand to arrive. My knee ached less now that I wasn't running at someone else's pace. I had time to rest, time to heal, time that belonged to me. Clara stopped by often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with nothing but conversation. We talked about books, gardens, the small things that filled ordinary days with meaning. For the first time in years, I felt seen without having to prove my worth. Her presence reminded me that love didn't always have to come with conditions. I still thought of my nephew, his laugh, the way his small hand had curled around mine. I loved him, and I always would, but I understood now that love for him didn't require sacrificing myself to Marjorie's demands. If she chose to keep me at arm's length, that was her decision. I no longer needed to buy my place in their lives. Evenings became mine again. I read books I had abandoned on the shelf, called old friends I hadn't spoken to in years, and let silence sit comfortably in my home. Each choice I made was a stitch pulling me back together. I didn't regret the boundary I'd drawn. It wasn't vengeance, it was survival. And more than that, It was peace. Blood might tie us, but it had never guaranteed kindness. Respect was what made family, and respect was what I finally chose for myself. As I sat on the porch one evening, the sky streaked with fading light, I found myself wondering if respect defines family. Who would truly remain in yours? My name is Amara Lysol, and at 28, I've built a quiet life for myself in Charlotte, North Carolina. I work as a graphic designer from a small loft apartment downtown, a space filled with bright sketches, coffee mugs, and the hum of my laptop long past midnight. On the surface, it looks steady, the kind of independence I dreamed about when I was younger, but family ties have a way of tugging at you, even when you try to outgrow them. My sister Serena lives only a few blocks away. She's 30, just 2 years older, but the distance between us has always felt wider. Growing up, we fought for the same scarce affection, our mother's tired smiles after double shifts, scraps of attention when our father had already vanished from the picture. I learned to push forward, to survive by building my own path. Serena, though, carried the weight differently, and too often it turned into resentment. To anyone watching, we look like sisters who stayed close, meeting for coffee on weekends, swapping recipes, even taking turns hosting dinner. We laugh in public, trade stories like nothing's wrong, but under the surface is a quiet strain neither of us names. I know she envies how I worked my way into a stable career. I know she still feels left behind. And I, though I rarely admit it, still long for her to see me as more than a rival. I tell myself the tension is manageable. That shared blood is reason enough to keep showing up. Still, every conversation feels like walking a narrow bridge, one misstep away from dropping into old wounds. One night, long after I thought the house was asleep, I learned just how fragile that bridge really was. The night was quiet, the kind of silence that settles heavy after a long day. Serena had insisted on staying over after dinner, saying she didn't feel like driving back to her apartment. I didn't mind at first. It had been a while since we'd spent a night under the same roof. I went to bed early, but sometime after midnight, I stirred awake, thirsty, padding softly into the kitchen. I stopped when I heard her voice. Serena was sitting at my kitchen table, her phone pressed tight to her ear, whispering in a rush of Spanish. At first I thought I'd misheard, but then the words cut through the stillness. Plan, documentos, keep her out. My heart gave a sharp jolt. I stayed in the hallway, hidden by the shadows, every nerve awake. Serena had taken Spanish years ago in college. She'd teased me back then for fumbling through a few phrases, never knowing I kept studying quietly long after she quit. Online courses, language apps, late nights repeating words to myself until they stuck. It had been my private accomplishment. And now, that secret was the only reason I understood what she was saying. Her tone was urgent, almost conspiratorial, and the pauses told me she wasn't just gossiping. She was coordinating something, and whoever was on the other end wasn't speaking English either. My throat went dry. Why would my own sister be whispering like this in my kitchen, in the middle of the night? As if she didn't want me to hear the phrases replayed in my head, the plan, the documents. Keep her out. I stepped back before she could notice me, retreating to my room as quietly as I'd come. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, every word echoing like a warning. Was it paranoia to think those whispers were about me, or the first crack in a secret I wasn't supposed to hear by morning? The night felt almost like a dream I wasn't sure I'd had. The kitchen smelled of brewed coffee, and Serena was already at the table, smiling like the sun had risen just for her. A neat white bag sat between us, the kind from the bakery down the street. She pushed it toward me with an exaggerated flourish. "Croissants and coffee for my favorite sister," she said, her voice light, almost too light. I sat down slowly, my mind replaying the whispers I'd overheard only hours before. Her cheeriness felt staged, every word a little too polished. I tore off a corner of the pastry, chewing without tasting, waiting for her to show her hand. She didn't make me wait long. So, she began, resting her chin in her palm. I found something amazing for you. A design retreat. Abroad. She paused for effect, letting the word linger. Spain. Isn't that exciting? I blinked at her, caught off guard. Spain. Yes. She rushed on, eyes bright. Workshops, networking, even a showcase for your portfolio. It's all lined up. Perfect timing, too. You've been working so hard. Amara, you deserve this. Her voice dripped with sweetness, but I felt my chest tighten. A trip abroad, arranged without me knowing flights, schedules, strangers. She spoke like everything was already decided. I don't remember signing up for anything, I said carefully. You didn't have to. I've got contacts. Remember? They'll take care of you. She waved her hand like it was a gift I should be grateful for. All you have to do is pack. I nodded, forcing a smile to match hers. But my thoughts churned. Serena never did anything without an angle. And last night's whispers came back with a vengeance plan. Documents. Keep her out. Was this trip really an opportunity or a way to erase me from something bigger? As I stirred cream into my coffee, Serena kept talking about the so-called retreat, her voice warm and persuasive. I nodded along, but inside my mind was spinning. I had heard her words the night before, not just sounds, but meaning. And that changed everything. It took me back to the first time I'd felt invisible because of language. In high school, when some of my friends switched to Spanish during lunch, laughter spilling out like secrets, I'd smiled dumbly, pretending it didn't sting. Later, at my first design job, coworkers from different backgrounds would joke in Spanish across the office. They weren't unkind, but I hated the way it made me feel always on the edge, never inside. That was when I started learning on my own. I bought cheap grammar books, downloaded free apps, scribbled vocabulary lists late at night. At first, it was clumsy rolling R's that wouldn't come, verbs that tangled in my throat. But slowly, piece by piece, I began to understand. By the time I was 23, I could follow conversations on the bus, catch jokes on TV shows, even chat politely with clients who slipped into Spanish without realizing it. Still, I never told Serena. She would have laughed, called me obsessive, maybe even accused me of trying to compete with her. Now, sitting across from her, I felt the secret I'd guarded for years shift into something else, a weapon, sharp and quiet. The words she whispered last night came back with clarity. El plan, documentos. Keep her out. That wasn't about some design retreat. It was about the estate, our uncle's property in the mountains, the one that had been a point of quiet speculation ever since his health began to fail. I thought of Uncle Robert's warm smile, his habit of scribbling notes about family memories in the margins of old books. He had hinted once that he wanted the cabin to stay with someone who would value it, not sell it off. If Serena was plotting around that promise, then the retreat wasn't generosity, it was exile. I sipped my coffee, keeping my face calm, but inside, the decision weighed heavy. If knowledge is power, when should I reveal I understand every word? Later that afternoon, Serena left her coffee half-finished on the table and disappeared into the bathroom with her phone. I told myself not to pry, not to feed the gnawing suspicion clawing at my chest, but then my eyes landed on her laptop, still open on the counter, the screen glowing with an email tab. My pulse quickened. I hesitated, every lesson about respecting privacy flashing through my mind, but privacy had already been broken hers when I overheard the whispers, mine when she plotted to send me out of the country under false pretenses. I crossed the room and slid into the chair. My breath caught somewhere between fear and fury. The emails were in Spanish, long threads with a lawyer whose name I didn't recognize. My heart thudded as I scrolled. Words leapt out at me, undeniable even in their polite legal phrasing transferencia de derechos, herencia, propiedad en las montañas, transfer of rights, inheritance, mountain property. I pressed a hand to my mouth. Uncle Robert's cabin. The place tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains, worth more than anything else he owned. A family treasure, the kind of inheritance people dreamed about, and Serena was arranging for it to become hers alone. One message froze me cold. Necesitamos mantener a Amara fuera. El viaje al extranjero la distraerá. Firmaremos mientras ella esté ausente. We need to keep Amara out. The trip abroad will distract her. We'll sign while she's away. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. Serena didn't want to share. She wanted me gone, written out of the future, a ghost while she claimed everything. The bathroom door creaked, and I snapped the laptop shut, sliding back into my chair as if nothing had happened. My palms were slick with sweat, my heart pounding against my ribs. I forced myself to breathe evenly as Serena reappeared, her smile practiced, her tone casual. She picked up her coffee and asked about my latest project, as if she hadn't just laid the groundwork to steal the life our uncle had intended to pass on. How do you fight someone who knows your every weakness, except the one you've kept hidden that evening, while Serena scrolled through her phone in the living room? I sat across from her pretending to sketch logos in my notebook. In reality, my own phone lay on the armrest beside me, recording every word of her low Spanish murmurs. The device captured fragments, mentions of documentos, meetings, and the lawyer's name I had already seen glowing on her laptop screen. Each phrase felt like a nail driven into the fragile shell of trust between us. Later, when she stepped into the kitchen to make tea, I slipped to the counter, opened her laptop again, and quickly screenshotted the emails I had discovered earlier. My fingers shook as I saved them into a hidden folder on my own device, covering my tracks carefully. I wrote down the lawyer's name on a scrap of paper, committing it to memory. The proof was there now, sitting heavy in my pocket. And yet, holding it didn't make me feel triumphant, it made me ache. I thought of Serena not as the schemer whispering in Spanish, but as the girl I grew up beside. The girl who sulked when she couldn't afford prom shoes, who snapped at me when teachers praised my work, who always felt like the world favored me while leaving her behind. Serena's life had been a string of starts that never lasted, jobs lost, debt stacked, friendships burned. I could almost hear the bitterness in her voice now, the desperation behind her plan. She wanted more than the cabin. She wanted proof that she wasn't the forgotten one, that she could finally outpace me. A pang of pity tugged at me, but I smothered it quickly. Pity wouldn't protect me when papers were signed and my name erased. For years, I had learned to bend, to soften, to forgive. But this wasn't the kind of wound you healed with kindness. Serena's smile returned as she set the tea down, her voice casual as though nothing lay beneath. I forced a steady breath, determined to match her calm. Will compassion save my sister or destroy my chance to protect myself? Serena leaned against the counter the next morning, sipping coffee with a grin that felt rehearsed. "You really should start packing, Amara," she said lightly. "Spain will be here before you know it. I even found a guidebook for you." She slid the glossy booklet across the table as if it were a thoughtful gift. I traced my fingers over the cover, careful to keep my expression neutral. Inside, my pulse thudded with the weight of what I already knew. If Serena noticed the stiffness in my smile, she didn't show it. She kept talking about flights, hotel rooms, opportunities, as though each detail was another thread meant to weave me out of my own life. I nodded, murmuring my thanks, but every word was measured, every glance restrained. Let her think I was oblivious. Let her believe I was the younger sister still chasing her approval. When she finally left for an appointment, I sat at my desk, the apartment quiet enough to hear my own breathing. I pulled out the lawyer's name I had scribbled on a scrap of paper and searched for his office. My hands trembled as I typed out a message, requesting a meeting to discuss Uncle Robert's estate. I didn't dare say too much, only enough to secure a time before Serena could act. The reply came quickly tomorrow morning. First thing. My chest tightened with both fear and relief. The very stage Serena thought she controlled would become mine. That evening, Serena chattered about the retreat again, circling back to packing lists and airport check-ins. I nodded at the right moments, hiding the storm building inside me. Every word she spoke was another reminder of the trap she thought she had set. When the trap finally closes, who will be caught inside Serena, or me, the next morning? The law office smelled faintly of cedar and leather, the kind of place where decisions stuck for generations. Serena walked in ahead of me, her heels sharp against the polished floor. She didn't notice me at first. Her posture was confident, almost triumphant, as she greeted the receptionist and announced she was here to finalize documents regarding our uncle's estate. I waited until she was led into the conference room before following. When I stepped through the doorway, her head snapped around. The smile drained from her face, leaving only shock. "Amara," she stammered. "What are you doing here? I thought I know what you thought," I said quietly, sliding into the chair across from her. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled beneath the table. "And I know what you planned." The lawyer, a gray-haired man with a sharp gaze, looked between us. "Is there a problem?" I pulled my phone from my bag, pressing play. Serena's voice filled the room, her whispers in Spanish about keeping me out, about the retreat, about the cabin. I let it play long enough for the weight of her words to settle. Then I stopped the recording and looked at her directly. I understood every word, I said, switching effortlessly into Spanish. I repeated her phrases back to her, translating them line by line for the lawyer. She intended to send me abroad, so she could sign everything in my absence. The silence in the room thickened. Serena's mouth opened and closed, no excuses forming. The lawyer leaned back, his expression unreadable. But the shift was clear. Her story had collapsed, and the balance had tilted toward me. Serena's hands clenched in her lap, her eyes flashing with a mix of fury and disbelief. For once, she had no script to hide behind. What happens when the very language meant to erase you becomes your sharpest weapon? The moment the recordings ended, Serena's composure cracked. She leaned forward, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. Amara, I've been drowning for years. Every time you succeed, I'm left with nothing but scraps. Do you know what it's like to always be the shadow, never the chosen one?" Her words tumbled out in a rush confession tangled with accusation. She painted herself as desperate, broken by debts, weighed down by failures. For a moment, I almost saw the girl we once were, clutching my hand when the lights went out, begging me not to leave her behind. But then her tone shifted, sharp and bitter. "You had no right to snoop. You betrayed me first. You always think you're better. Maybe I wanted something for myself for once." I steadied my voice. "You didn't just want something, Serena. You wanted everything. At my expense." I laid the screenshots and printed translations before the lawyer, the evidence undeniable. The lawyer cleared his throat, his tone firm. "These actions disqualify any claim you attempted to make. Ms. Lysol, the documents are void. Amara retains her rightful share of the estate." Serena's face went pale, then red, as if the words had physically struck her. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Finally, she pushed back her chair, her eyes burning with a mixture of rage and humiliation. I sat still, hands folded, heart pounding. This was what I had fought for, not to humiliate her, but to keep from being erased. The inheritance was secure, but the space between us had never felt wider. Is victory ever sweet when it comes at the cost of blood ties? Weeks later, I unlocked the cabin door with a key that finally felt like mine. The Blue Ridge air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, and sunlight spilled across the wide porch. Inside, the cabin was bare at first, echoing wood floors, empty walls, but slowly I began to fill it with pieces of myself, bright prints from my studio, shelves lined with books I'd carried since college, Soft blankets folded neatly across the couch. Each nail I hammered, each frame I hung, felt like reclaiming a part of me that had been hidden in the shadow of someone else's hunger. Serena's presence lingered only through my phone. Every day brought new messages, sharp rants accusing me of betrayal, then sudden shifts into guilt, apologies, pleas for another chance. I read them once or twice at the beginning, my chest tightening, but I never replied. Silence was my answer. The boundary I should have drawn years ago. In the evenings, I'd sit by the stone fireplace, sketchbook on my lap, listening to the quiet. For so long, I thought family meant endurance, swallowing pain to keep the bond intact. But standing in this cabin, surrounded by choices that were finally mine, I understood something different. Loyalty without respect was just a chain. Dignity mattered more. I wasn't erasing Serena, but I wasn't carrying her anymore either. I had learned her secrets, stopped her lies, and chosen my own survival. When betrayal comes from the one closest to you, is forgiveness strength or is walking away the only way to survive?